The regressed S-rank hunter decided to destroy the guild. Your signature? Kwon Tae-sung asked. Dojin took the contract and turned to the final page. It was a section he hadn't read in his previous life. Back then, he had seen the name Cheongun and signed without hesitation. This time was different. For the first year after awakening, the guild retains the right to assign missions. The guild will also manage records of ability changes and mana readings obtained during raids. In the event of death or disappearance, authority over the handling of field records will pass to the guild. Dojin's gaze stopped on the final sentence. Records remained even after a person died, but if whoever held those records altered them, the dead couldn't object. Just like what had happened to him in his previous life. Reading it won't change anything. Kwon Tae-sung sat in the chair across from him. Not many places offer terms this to a new E rank. I'm aware. Your face says otherwise. Dojin set his pen to the bottom of the contract. He could refuse and run right now. But then he would never find the original death report, learn the truth behind the blue line on his wrist, or access the guild's records on it. If he attacked Cheongun from outside the guild, Kwon Tae-sung would erase every record and pretend he knew nothing. Dojin had to get inside. He signed his name. Kwon Tae-sung took the contract back. After checking the signature, he switched on the slim device beside him. Choose your first mission. Several options appeared on the screen. Safety training. Equipment organization. Carrying supplies into a low-rank gate. Most were appropriate jobs for a new E rank. Dojin scrolled to the bottom of the list. One option was displayed there in small print. Assistance recovering equipment from a gate scheduled for closure. No one had volunteered yet. The moment he saw the words, a hazy memory surfaced. A collapsed entrance. Equipment they claimed they hadn't been able to recover. And the people who had definitely been candidates, only to vanish from the roster one day. He couldn't clearly remember their faces or names. He had only recently joined Cheongun at the time and hadn't paid them much attention. But after they disappeared, the guild claimed they had never recruited them in the first place. Dojin selected the option. Kwon Tae-sung's eyes shifted to the screen. You're choosing this? Yes. The gate will be closing soon. There's nothing worth getting from it. Which means there should be plenty of old traces. Dojin pointed to his assessment sheet. My ability can determine whether the equipment functioned properly. It wasn't a lie. Kwon Tae-sung didn't approve it immediately. He looked back and forth between Dojin's face and his E-rank assessment. Do you think taking dangerous missions will raise your rank faster? It says here that equipment recovery isn't a dangerous mission. You certainly read documents closely. Kwon Tae-sung pressed the approval button. You leave tomorrow morning, come back alive, and I'll let you choose your next mission too. Dojin's expression didn't change. Come back alive. It sounded like ordinary encouragement. For now, that was all it was. The next morning, Dojin checked the bag he'd been issued in front of the barricade. It contained a recording device, emergency medicine, and spare mana lamps. 6 candidates would be going in together. One of them approached Dojin. You're the guy from yesterday, right? It was Yoon Sia. She wore light protective gear and had a short spear slung across her back. She hadn't even been issued official guild equipment yet. Dojin closed his bag. What if I am? You kept staring at me. You mistook me for someone else. Even though we made eye contact? Dojin didn't answer. He remembered what Sia had said over the comms before he died. I'm sorry. He couldn't superimpose that one sentence over the person standing before him now. The Sia of the present hadn't done anything. Dojin knew that, but knowing it didn't mean he could immediately feel at ease around her. You two, enough chit-chat. The field supervisor called the candidates over. He spread a map across a table set up outside the gate. You're only going as far as the entrance area. Recover the 4 measuring devices installed inside and come back. Don't enter the inner passage, and don't touch the core. One of the candidates asked a question. I heard this gate is about to close. Isn't it dangerous? That's why you're only retrieving the equipment. The readings were stable through yesterday. The supervisor held up the external controller from the table. The candidates would carry a return device paired with it. Once return was authorized from outside, pressing the button on the device inside would open the exit. If anything goes wrong, I'll authorize your return from out here. All you have to do is press the button on the return device. The explanation was brief. The supervisor didn't go in. Only the 6 candidates passed through the gate, one after another. Inside, a cracked underground passage stretched into the distance. The faint light running along the walls resembled emergency lights on the verge of going out. The air was cold. The equipment is up ahead. The candidate at the front checked the map. Bringing up the rear, Dojin examined the walls and floor. Faint mana traces overlapped in several directions. In his previous life, he had dismissed such traces as useless remnants. He had focused solely on strengthening his power to reflect incoming attacks. That had made him an S rank. And in the end, he had been left alone. This time, he had no intention of following the same path. Dojin placed a hand on the wall. The older traces had lost their shape. Mana released when the equipment was installed, mana scattered by the gate's tremors, and traces left by people moving farther inside were all mixed together. Then something shifted within the wall. Mana converged at a single point. Dojin's body reacted before his mind did. He thrust out a hand. Go back. Nothing happened. In his previous life, he would have reflected the attack forming inside the wall. Not now. His E-rank body lacked the power to reverse its direction. But he could see it. Where the mana was gathering. The direction it would take as it burst through the wall. Dojin turned his head. Xia was standing directly in its path. 2 steps left. Xia moved without asking why. An instant later, the wall exploded. A jagged mass of mana tore through the spot where Xia had been standing. Black limbs burst from the fissure in the wall. The other candidates recoiled in shock. Xia alone moved forward. She planted her left foot, twisted her body, and thrust her short spear. The spearhead sank into the monster's body within the wall. The monster thrashed. Xia kept hold of the shaft and drove it deeper. 2 other candidates belatedly charged in and pried the wall open. A moment later, the monster stopped moving. Xia pulled out her spear and looked back at Dojin. How did you know? I saw it. Through the wall? I saw the direction the mana was moving. Dojin pointed to the hole left in the wall. Before the attack began, power gathered in there. Xia narrowed her eyes. You didn't see what was about to happen? I read a force that was already in motion. My ability doesn't let me see thoughts or words. You looked awfully familiar with it for that. Instead of answering, Dojin turned away. His right arm, the one he had just thrust out, was trembling. Intellectually, he knew he no longer had that power. Yet the instant he saw the attack, the habits of his previous life had taken over. If things had continued like that, he wouldn't have been able to protect Xia. He had read the attack's direction through its trajectory, and Xia had moved immediately. That was why they had stopped it. He hadn't done it alone. The realization felt foreign to Dojin. The group proceeded through the passage more cautiously. All 4 measuring devices were exactly where the map indicated. The candidates powered them down and divided them among their bags. Dojin watched the floor instead of the equipment. There were traces of people passing through. And they didn't all belong to the group that had just entered. He returned to the access recorder mounted near the entrance inside the gate. Each time someone passed through the gate, the recorder emitted a brief pulse of mana to verify their passage. The screen showed that it had last been reset this morning. When Dojin placed his hand on it, he saw the traces of every activation since that reset. The first activation. The second. He separated the overlapping traces into chronological order. Dojin's hand stopped as he counted them one by one. There had been 9. The official roster they had received today listed only 6 people. Did anyone come in before us? The other candidates turned at Dojin's question. The one who had been leading shook his head. No, they said we were the first team. Dojin followed the traces across the floor. The 3 who had entered first hadn't remained near the entrance. They had headed into the inner passage. There were no traces of them returning outside. Dojin raised his radio. Supervisor, how many people entered today? Why are you asking that all of a sudden? The access recorder activated 9 times. That's 3 more than the roster. A brief silence followed. You must have mistaken old traces for new ones. These traces appeared after the reset time recorded on the screen this morning. No one entered who wasn't on the roster. The supervisor's answer was firm. Dojin looked at the 3 trails leading deeper inside. He couldn't tell who had sent them or why. His reading ability couldn't reveal people's thoughts. But there was no question that 3 people had gone in. Stop wasting time and collect the equipment. Withdraw immediately. The transmission ended. The candidates exchanged uneasy glances. Let's get outside and confirm it first. Right, they told us not to go any farther in. Dojin also looked at the return device the candidates had brought with them. At that moment, the blue ring at its center went dark. A brief warning tone echoed through the passage. One of the candidates pressed the button. Why isn't it working? Dojin was already crouching in front of the return device. A thin stream of mana flowed in from the external controller held by the supervisor. After reaching the center of the return device, it severed the external authorization. An external shutdown command. A blood-stained hand. A darkened return device. The final scene of his previous life overlapped with the present. Dojin's breath stopped. Hey. He heard Xia's voice. Are you okay? Dojin closed his eyes, then opened them again. This wasn't that time. His body was different. The place was different. The people with him were different. Then red warning lights flared across the ceiling. Risk of gate collapse confirmed. Estimated time until collapse, 3 hours. One of the candidates swallowed a curse. They said it was stable through yesterday. Dojin searched his memories. This gate had collapsed tomorrow afternoon. At least, that was what the records from his previous life had stated. Had the future changed because he had chosen this mission? Or had the recorded date been a lie from the beginning? He couldn't tell which. The supervisor's voice no longer came through the radio. The candidates suggested waiting at the entrance for the device to reactivate. Some argued that moving would only put them in greater danger if the passage itself collapsed. It wasn't an unreasonable judgment. Dojin gazed into the inner passage. The traces of the 3 who had entered before them continued into the darkness. 2 of the trails had almost entirely faded. But one was different. A faint thread of mana stirred again from deeper inside. It wasn't a dead trace. Someone was still using their power. Someone's alive in there. The candidates fell silent. Dojin stepped toward the inner passage. If he disobeyed the supervisor's orders, he would be marked as a problem from his very first day. His plan to quietly search for evidence while pretending to be an ordinary E-rank newcomer would also fall apart. Even so, he couldn't wait here. If he abandoned people simply because their names weren't on the roster, he would be no different from the Cheongun of his previous life. After he took 2 steps, someone grabbed his arm. It was Sia. "Prove it first. Give us a reason to believe you."